Hey, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Reality Rights. I am author Ellie Alexander, and I am here with the tech guy.
I am the tech guy. Hello, hello.
Hey, this is the podcast where we pull back the curtain on all things bookish, writing, and answer any questions that readers have as well.
That's right. And if you are new here, welcome. And if you've listened to previous episodes, we hope you enjoy this one as well. Please give us a like and a follow. And if you'd be so kind, drop a review on your favorite podcasting platform or here on YouTube, wherever you like to listen or watch your podcasts.
Podcasts.
Yeah.
I think we should call it a podcast.
Podcast. Yeah. That was, I made up a new word there for a second. Yeah, totally.
I like it. Well, this week we're going to talk about food and food writing and everything that goes into a culinary mystery in particular, which is like its own subset of mysteries. And the darlings out there may or may not know this, but if you look at mysteries as a whole, that's a big category. And then within the genre, there are subgenres. So, true crime, noir, kind of a traditional mystery, thrillers, and then cozy. And then within the cozy, there is a subset of sort of crafts or focus. And culinary is probably the biggest. It's the granddaddy of them all.
It's the granddaddy of them all. Yeah. Now, so is the food the mystery, or is there a mystery on top of the food?
It's a good question.
I know the answer, but I don't know if all the darlings out there, maybe
maybe the mystery is, that could be its own thing, right? When you might have just invented a new genre.
I don't know if I like mystery food. Yeah.
There's the whole dining in the dark trend. I think we should do that.
Yeah, that's a thing, I guess. Yeah.
You don't sound very enthusiastic somehow.
I don't know. There's just something about not being able to see what you're putting in your mouth. Yeah, that's just
Yeah. No, so the mystery is always first and foremost, and then the secondary piece is a focus on, perhaps, like in my case, because I write a long-running Bakeshop Mystery series, there's a lot of baking and coffee involved. And then, you can whittle that down and get really specific in terms of the food. There are cheese shop mysteries and spice shop mysteries and wine mysteries and coffee mysteries. So, whatever you have a craving for, you can probably find in the pages of a book.
So find your favorite food and then pair it with murder.
Why not? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And a lot of these, not always, but 99% of the time in the cozy, the other bonus for readers is that you're going to get recipes in the back. So that's kind of the focus of our episode today, to talk about how that comes to be. And one of the first questions that I always get asked from readers is, are you a professional chef? Answer this one for me.
I don't know. It feels like a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
No, you're not.
No.
You've learned a tremendous amount over the years from which I imagine you're going to talk about. But you are not.
I was going to say just enough to be dangerous, like a tremendous amount to be able to pretend like I'm a real mystery chef. And I definitely am not.
Right. Yeah. Truth be told, is more than once you've created a recipe that, we've had for dinner or whatever, or dessert. And, we've been like, wow, this is really good. What's in it? And you're like, oh, a little this, a little that. And we're like, did you write it down? No. You never write it. You never write your recipes down.
Never. No, I don't believe in it. Yeah. Until I have to at the end. And then I'm like,
right.
Shoot, I should have much earlier on. Yeah.
Right.
So the other funny thing is I have a number of writer friends who also, like me, write culinary cozy mysteries. And I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus here. Some of them are out about it, but a few of them don't actually cook or bake at all.
Yeah, that's,
You
I
don't
think
have to.
yeah, right. I think there's a lot of, that. Not just in writing, but just in anything, you like, it's funny. You find like, a typecast actor, for example, that is like a big action star or whatever, but never is like goes outside or rides motorcycles or anything like that. It's
Yeah,
just like, they're just good at what they do. And,
exactly.
yeah, they're very creative.
You can be a great food writer and not have to, be a professional or even semi-professional baker. I just have always happened to love baking and food, and you do too. You're a great cook. So that's just sort of part of our family and what we do. But yeah, it's sort of yeah.
Also not a professional
No.
baker though.
Although
So.
you worked in a commercial kitchen, whereas I did not. Should have not.
Yeah.
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 You were a line cook in college.
I did. Yeah. Well, I started out as a dishwasher, but I worked my way up.
You worked your way up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first thing I think we should talk about is why food. And I have thoughts on that, but I will be super interested to hear from the darlings at the end of this episode why food resonates with you and why you keep coming back to reading culinary cozies. I think that food is a love language. I think it's this point of connection. It's also a really sensory experience. So for me, it adds this other layer, not only to the writing, but to the experience of writing it. And then hopefully that comes through with the reader, that you're getting this other worldly piece of a story. And you get to be immersed in the smells and the textures and maybe even the tastes of Torte, my fictional bake shop, when you're reading this series.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a wildly popular subject. There probably wouldn't be an Instagram without food. I would have to say. I mean, it definitely wouldn't be what it is today without food and food pictures and things. So, taking the visual of food and transforming it into just words so that people can get a mental image of what you're talking about, that is definitely something that a lot of writers are good at, and I think that's one of the reasons it's super popular in the cozy space.
I think so too. And then it also taps into this fantasy that I think a lot of us have about, owning a small bake shop or a coffee shop or a winery or a brew pub. I mean, yeah, exactly. You and I have had a zillion conversations about this over the years, and it's so easy to romanticize it. And then, when I'm out in the real world interviewing pastry chefs, or, we're visiting a brewery and talking to the brewers and the owners, and you're like, oh no, this is a ton of work.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah. Those research trips always kind of douse the dream fire a little bit, just because you do realize, oh yeah, it is a lot of work. It's probably a little bit easier to write about food than it is to kind of pull off the perfect recipe, unless that's your thing, right? So
yeah. And then do it again and again every day, and wake up and have those big, like in the series
for hundreds of people.
For hundreds of series. Exactly. Or like, I'm just getting ready to dive deeper into book 21 for the Bakeshop Mysteries. And I always start them out with Jules, like taking this lovely morning walk to the bake shop, and she loves it being quiet in Ashland. And I'm like, she has to be there at 4 a.m. Like, that's also not so romantic in the real world.
Yeah, no, I think, and there are a bunch of great movies and TV shows about restaurants and the bakeries and the food industry and stuff. But I think for all the darlings out there, like if you haven't seen The Bear, just watch The Bear, and you'll it's on Hulu, right? Yeah, I think it's
Hulu.
Yeah, watch The Bear, just a couple episodes of that, and you'll realize like, it is a lot of work to run a restaurant or a bakery or, brew pub or coffee shop or any of that. It is a lot of work. So, yeah, I think the fantasy of that for everyone is like, oh, it'd be so romantic to be able to do this. And it really would. But, Yeah, you'd be getting up early every day.
You'd be getting up early. And we've had the good fortune of having friends who own coffee shops and getting to really pick their brain and see what that process is like. And then the same even for wineries, our favorite winery in Ashland, seeing because I've always thought it would be so amazing to own our own vineyard and you're out looking at the grapes and the beautiful sunset. Oh no, that's also just a ton of physical labor, stress, worrying about wildfires and weather and, bugs and crops. And
Now the trick is if you want to do that, I guess for me, it would be win the lottery, become independently wealthy, and then do that and just be able to sit back and do all those things that you dreamed about doing without actually doing the work, day-to-day work.
Right.
Probably still stress about it. I don't know, but maybe
not. Yeah. Or setting up a good segue, you could do what I have done and you could just write about these and make it all fictional. And it's fantastic. So I think those are sort of all of the reasons that food resonate. And I also think it's such a point of connection. We have so much disconnection in the world right now. And food is kind of this leveling space where we can all come to the table and enjoy a meal and the experience of that in a way that kind of sloughs off some of the other stuff, which I think is important.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, and I mean, all dreams aside, in all seriousness, you knew a fair amount about baking and cooking before you started writing. But I think you should talk a little bit about the research that has gone into just writing the Bakeshop Mystery series, and everything you've learned and the things that have surprised you, I think, more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's always part of the process. When I was first starting the series, I did a deep dive into food. So, the mystery, of course, is first and foremost. And when I'm working on a draft, the first draft is just whatever is top of mind, whatever I'm thinking about. I don't always go in with a vision of a recipe. I definitely go in with an idea of seasonality in mind because I know that when the book is being set. So I want the food to reflect whatever's happening in terms of weather. You don't want to be making some big hearty stew and it's 108 outside. Although we'll talk about that because that's usually what happens. But when I was first starting out, I felt fairly confident about putting the mystery together because I had already written a few mysteries, but I felt less confident about making sure that I got the food writing right. And I think the best compliment I ever get is when an actual pastry chef or baker will email me and say, were you a professional chef? You've gotten this right. You're nailing it. And I'm like, yes. Okay, good. That's all just research. So some of that is even just hours and hours of YouTube videos and watching every single baking show I could find on Netflix early on. And then, again, having the amazing gift of having friends and colleagues who are talented. And I had some pastry muses early on in the day. Chrissy from Tier comes to mind. So I tried to take everything I could and then research as much as possible about also the operational piece of running a bake shop, because there's the baking piece, but then there's everything else that goes into running and managing a shop behind the scenes. So inventory and staffing and all of the not so sexy piece of it.
Right. Totally. Food inspections, cleanliness, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Making sure, allergies and how things would be stored and processes, remodels, hours. I have so much more information in my brain and in a zillion journals here in my office that don't ever make it to the page. But I think it's important as a writer, you want to know more than less always, right? And so what ends up on the page is an amalgam of what maybe I know on a broader level, I guess.
Yeah. Well, how do you decide that? You go, Chrissy is a great example, extremely talented, baker that we, pastry chef, I should say, that we knew from very early on. She made a fabulous birthday cake for me one year.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
Fantastic. But, how do you, like, obviously you can't put every step, like 1 through 100 that they do, in making a recipe. So how do you decide as a writer to, like, how much detail to include versus leaving things out?
Yeah. So I think for me, what I do, and this is definitely different for some of my friends who write in the genre, but when I do that first draft, I'm just picking up top of mind, like, what am I craving at this moment? What also makes sense seasonally, So if I'm writing a book about Halloween, that I'm going to be thinking like fall and pumpkin and that sort of thing. So once I have finished a first draft, and there's barely anything in a first draft. Jules is in the kitchen and it is bare bones. It's like, and she's baking a chocolate banana cake. Okay. Once I have finished the first draft, I go back through and then I really concentrate on these little things that have just come up top of mind. Do they make sense? First of all. Second of all, is it something that I think I can actually bake? Is it like, how involved is it? Because some of what she's baking is next level, like laminating her own croissant dough and things like that, where I'm like, I don't really have time to tackle that, but love it. What will resonate with readers and the darlings? Because one thing that I've learned, going back to that question to you, that surprises me a lot is I do think that a lot of readers come to me now for baking advice and input, which is really cool. I always have to respond like, I'm not really a pastry chef, so I'll tell you like what I know, but be careful. But so many readers who have never attempted even something like a cookie recipe before reading the books. So I also want to make sure that it's accessible to readers. So those are kind of like the three things I'm thinking about then when I'm like, all right, how are
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Not using the names of kitchen tools and things that wouldn't be commonplace in like a everyday kitchen, that you might. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, that from even some of the TorTess kitchen videos we were doing back in the day when we were going heavy on sharing baking videos, which was so much fun. But I was always surprised by comments that we would get. Well, like, I don't have a KitchenAid mixer or an electric, like, right. Can I do that by hand? Like, oh yeah, of course you can. And again, like, not being a professional chef, we don't have fancy equipment, but
right.
Knowing that everybody's coming in at a different level and wanting to meet each reader where they're at so they can feel like, oh, if I got inspired to bake something from this book, there's something in there that I can actually try.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I know. And you get so many comments from, readers who have like, I've seen, write in that haven't really been cookers or, they haven't been into cooking or baking before. And then they read one of your books and they try one of the recipes and they're just blown away. So that's always fun to see, like, somebody's, maybe starting something new that they had always thought was out of reach, but saw a recipe in one of the Bakeshop Mysteries and is now rolling with it.
Yeah, exactly. So after that second pass, when I go through and I start thinking like, okay, this recipe is something I can do. This recipe feels like something that a reader might want to try. This recipe also makes sense in terms of the storyline, the setting, the time of year. Then what I will do is I will attempt to make all of these recipes. And each book has somewhere between 6 and 8 recipes in it. Every book has also a coffee recipe. I try to mix up a few savory recipes and sweet recipes. So, but on average, each book has somewhere between 6 and 8 recipes.
Of course, they have coffee in them because that's one thing you test more than anything, I think. Right. Probably coffee recipes.
That I had a coffee right now. Come on. So I would say, even though there are 6 or 8 recipes that make the final cut, I am often testing more like 10 because there are often things that bomb. That don't.
Yeah, no, there have been some. Yeah, there have been. Most of the recipes are amazing. I will say that, but yes, there are some that it's good that they didn't make the cut. And it's good that they didn't make it into the books.
Exactly. No, you don't want to taste something that's terrible. The first thing that comes to mind is in Meet Your Baker. Oh, it might have been A Batter of Life or Death, one of the early books, we were living in Vancouver and we had the fig tree in the backyard.
Oh, the figs. Yeah. Woo.
And Tort is an artisan bake shop too. So Julie's always trying to elevate, like she's doing things that are kind of cutting edge, incorporating organic ingredients, what's locally sourced. So I thought, okay, figs. I will make a fig cake with olive oil and chocolate, and it'll be kind of Mediterranean and really like dense and delicious. And as you know, a lot of what I bake tastes good. Like anything that makes the final cut, I feel very confident. Like, okay, if you bake this, you're going to enjoy it. My skill set is not the aesthetics like Jules. She is also a pastry artist, as are many of the people who we've met along the way, like Chrissy from Tier. My things do not always look beautiful. They look definitely homemade, which is fine. But this fig cake, I felt so good about because I made them in these little ramekins. We picked figs from our own fig tree. Came out beautifully. I dusted them with powdered sugar and a little cocoa powder. They looked so gorgeous. And I thought like, wow, this is the pinnacle of my baking success. And then we all took a bite.
Yeah, that was something. I guess the easiest way they tasted good. The easiest way to describe them would be like you had gone to the beach real quick and dipped them in sand.
And just grainy.
Yeah, they were super grainy, super grainy. Oh, it was just like, and for hours afterwards, you'd just be like crunching, like just getting little bits of the grain. So yeah, that wasn't the best. That wasn't the best recipe.
That did not make the cut. Instead, there is a recipe for bacon wrapped figs because I was also on deadline for the recipe. So I didn't have a lot of time to go back to the drawing board. So instead, it's a grilled fig with like wrapped in bacon. It's a perfect little savory appetizer. Done. Easy.
Well, and you wrap anything in bacon, it'd be okay. So you could wrap sand in bacon and it'd probably be pretty good. So.
Maybe. But yeah, so then I'm in the kitchen. I am not only baking and testing all of these recipes because I want to make sure that the final product is something that a reader can do and achieve, and that the final product also tastes delicious. But I am also at that stage of my writing taking sensory notes myself, because that's like another layer of editing for the book. So I'm thinking about like, ooh, what does it actually smell like? How does it feel when my hands are in the dough? Is the kitchen steaming up? Is it, like all of those things. And that, ooh, there goes my microphone. Here we go. That all ends up being another layer of editing and sensory detail, which hopefully then again gives the darling the experience of really being in the kitchen with Jules.
Yeah, and again, that the combination of the writing about the food itself and then the environment that the food's being made in, like I know a lot of readers have commented just on the fact that you make them feel like they're at Tort, like they're right there next to Jules making whatever it is she's making, and kind of getting that sensory input, which is really cool.
But then back to your other question, like how do you know how much is too much or not enough? Because obviously, first and foremost, the focus has to be on the mystery. We gotta get to the body. She needs to be interviewing suspects. And so there's that delicate balance point in terms of, okay, now she's in the kitchen. The kitchen, from a writer's lens and her baking is really, I feel like sometimes cheating. Like it's a great tool for her to have time to be in her head so she can be, making a batch of homemade cinnamon rolls, and she's rolling out the dough and she's spreading layers of buttercream over the cinnamon. And then she's also thinking and processing like, oh, this conversation with this suspect makes me think X and blah, blah, blah. So really it's a tool to make sure that readers are able to be in her headspace and know what she's knowing at that point in time. And often the baking scenes are an opportunity for her to review suspects, for her to kind of rank who she thinks did it in order, and maybe even to shift some suspicion somewhere else. If she had a suspect that she was really homed in on, and now she's learned some other new piece of information, she might be thinking about that while she's baking.
Yeah, that's good. That makes sense. Do you think that translates into other, because I haven't read other cozy genres, but I know you have. Is that the same for other hobby or topic based cozies, like knitting? I know is a big one. Like, would that be the same thing?
I think it's the same thing. I think it's slightly, I think in the culinary cozy world, you spend a little more time than you do with other hobbies, just because of the nature of baking, you know? And when I go through and decide which recipes make the final cut, those recipes, Jules is actually physically baking in the book, because I also could never I wouldn't have space. You need an entire cookbook for everything that she references, even just in one book, because Tort is putting out so many things every day, right? So when I know, okay, this recipe is going to be in the back of the book, then I go back to that section, and it might be, like I said, she's reviewing suspects while she's also cracking eggs and cutting fresh strawberries and whatever. So those scenes have fleshed out baking details at a different level, for sure.
That makes sense. Okay. You realize you just said the C word, though, right? Like,
what did I say?
We're gonna get cookbook.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
So now the darlings out there who stopped listening right at that moment are going to, now it's going to be like, Ellie's going to release a cookbook. Yeah, totally.
That's up there with like the number one request I get by email. Pretty much, I don't want to say on a daily basis, but a weekly basis for sure. Yeah.
Oh, definitely weekly.
Yeah. When are we doing a cookbook? When are we doing a cookbook, Tech Guy? When's that happening? Tell me.
I mean, are we going to talk about it right now?
Sure, okay. Yeah, we can segue. It's all about writing.
I mean, yeah. So I think what we've talked a lot on this podcast about the writing process and the publishing process, and a little bit about book cover design and everything. I just think that one thing that the darlings out there who are asking for a cookbook, well, the one thing I would like them to understand more than anything else is just how much work a cookbook would be. Yes, you've made the recipes. Yes, we have those written down. Yes, we have all that. But the layout and photography of a cookbook is so much different than writing a cozy mystery or anything else that we've done. It is next level, and it would need to involve, well, first and foremost, we probably need a professional pastry chef and a professional cook to make the recipes.
100%. Yes.
And then we need a professional photographer to take pictures of those recipes. And then we need somebody to lay out the cook. Yeah, it's an expensive endeavor. It's very expensive.
And the vision that I have for a cookbook, it would have to be like a Jamie Oliver cookbook. I think about like his Christmas and his holiday cookbook. So we also would need a set designer, someone who would bring Tort to life. I mean, could we make a cookbook just you and me with, the skills we have? Sure, but that would not be an enjoyable experience for the darlings out there, or for us. We might end up murdering each other in that process.
Right. Well, and for the darlings out there who are inevitably going to comment or write in and say, "Oh, you don't need to do all that extra stuff. Just put together a list of the recipes," and it's like, no. Thank you. That's great. But for every one person that says that that's okay, there'd be 20 people that would just flame that book in the reviews about how terrible it was and where are the pictures and why isn't this laid out better? I mean, it would just, it's got to be, it has to be, like you said, like Jamie's. The one thing about modern cookbooks, and Jamie Oliver is a great example of that. And, he's one of, if not my favorite, which is why we have so many of his cookbooks. He tells a story as he's laying out the recipes and everything. And he goes around and interviews people and spends time in their spaces making the recipes with them and everything. So something like that is what I would want. And I know you too would want the Torte cookbook to be.
Yeah. I mean, I can see it in my head. I want it to happen. Don't get me wrong. I think we both do, but it's just, that is like a next level undertaking, as you said. And yeah, it would have to feel like I would want everyone, and myself included, when I opened the pages to feel like, oh, this is the Torte that I have known and loved for 21 books now. Like, oh,
Right.
this what an Andy coffee would look like. This is what a sterling flatbread would look like. Here's a Jules like 4-layer Torte. Like, it would need to tell a story. It would be super fun to tell the story with some of the chefs and baristas who we've known over the years too, to bring them in, to have it styled, to set up scenes like, there could be a picnic dinner at Uva outside and something at Lithia Park. And I mean, it would be magical, but it would also be $1 million to make that.
I know. I was just like, as you're listing off all those things, I'm like, yes, I would want that too. Yes. And then I'm like, okay, darlings, this cookbook's going to cost $178.
Know,
so
right?
it's like, yeah, I mean, I mean, it's going to be a $50 book for sure.
Yeah.
Like, I would imagine, like when all is said and done. But yeah, it's just a lot. It's a lot to do. And I know people want it and they'd love it, but
I know.
But the one thing I will say, and I'm going back through and reformatting all the, like, not all, but a lot of the recipes that you've shared over the years and everything are on your blog.
Yes.
And I've in the process of pulling all those over into a new recipe plugin that makes it really easy to print them out and or pin them on Pinterest if that's your thing. So hopefully that'll be done in the next couple weeks here, and all those will be there. I mean, they're already there, but they're just blog posts. Now they're going to be actually formatted recipes. It'll be a lot easier to use. They're really cool. You can like tap on the ingredients and it'll cross it out. So as you're mixing stuff, you can go, oh yeah, I put a quarter cup of that in, cross it out. But cookbook, I don't know.
No, I love that. I feel like that's one step closer to the cookbook.
It is. Yeah.
We're on the path. We're manifesting it slowly but surely. And the fun thing about a lot of those recipes is many of them are from the books, but then there are also quite a few that are from the test kitchen that didn't make that too. Yeah. So you get to get a little sense of that as well, which is fun.
Well, that, and there are hundreds from like the 31 days of pie and 31 days of cookies and all the holiday stuff that we've done in the past. I mean, there are a lot of recipes there.
Yeah, you can bake your way through the books with us.
Right.
The other thing in terms of recipes is sometimes I will go into a book with a family recipe that I know that I want to share, and that's kind of a center point of the book. And that happened with Meet Your Baker. So the first recipe in that is for my mom's raspberry Danish. And then the second recipe, or, I don't know where it actually falls, but the other recipe from that book is my dad's mocha almond buttercream torte with apricot preserves. So a lot of times I will go in with an idea in mind. I get a lot of recipes from readers, which is super fun. But I can't usually put those in a book because they don't belong to me and there are copyright issues and things like that. I was able to partner with my friend Miri, who is gluten-free and dairy-free. And she put together a special cake recipe for Catch Me If You Candy. And we were talking a lot about how if you have food allergies and you go into a bakery, or even if you go into a bakery that specializes in food allergies, sometimes it's just you get like a basic chocolate or vanilla. There are one or two options. And so for her, she wanted to make sure that the recipe felt as like decadent and inclusive as something with torte. So getting to do some of those partnerships is fun. Would often. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that actually brings up a good point, though. Is that just and this, you've talked a lot about like write what you know, and so your recipes are written from your lens, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You're not always going to know like what every possible substitute of, an ingredient is. So can you make this recipe gluten-free? Like, probably, but I don't know. And so I guess just a quick aside to say, like, the darlings out there, these recipes are all born out of testing. So just test, like, just try it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, you have a funny story to tell. And be sure to post and tag Ellie and say, hey, FYI, I tried this. And the successes and the failures, because, we've had some failures. But yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Yes. No, great baking fails. Oh my gosh. We have some miles and miles of footage for that. Yeah, no. And I think because I don't have those similar food allergies, or, I'm not a practicing vegan. I try to work in like some vegan recipes every now and then. We love to incorporate vegan recipes in our own cooking, or same thing with gluten-free. But especially with baking, there's such a science to it. And like flour ratios don't always match up. The same thing goes for if you're substituting some kind of oil or alternative milk. So yeah, that's like its own beast. I was thinking back to, we're in September now. However, it is still warm, and we're going to have a heat wave this week. And I feel like every time I am working on the recipes, they are almost always to the letter off season.
Oh yeah, so totally.
It'll be like, I go back to on thin icing. And, this is set at Lake of the Woods in Southern Oregon. It's a snowstorm. It's cozy. It's winter. There are crackling fireplaces. This is like, hearty soups and stews and chocolate muffins. And I was writing that book when we were in the middle of a heat wave in July in Vancouver. And I'm just sweating like crazy and trying to describe, and then having to bake like, hey, who wants a hot soup night? Sorry.
I know.
That's what's for dinner.
We smelled, like, Luke and I smelled something coming out of the kitchen. We're like, let's go see what's for dinner. And we came because we knew you were in there baking some test recipes that we were going to be having that night for dinner. And so we came up, and you're like, it's like, almost 100 degrees outside. And we had like beef stew, some sort of stew that night. We were like, what? Oh, it was a gut bomb. It was delicious, but it was like, just kind of like, I can't eat another bite. Yeah.
Right. And so that's the other reality of, this is why it's called Reality Writes. That's the other reality of writing recipes. I am buying all those ingredients. I'm testing those ingredients. We're having that food for dinner, or we're sharing with friends or neighbors. Like, it's not like I get some bonus budget from the publishing house for like recipe testing. That's all on us.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's a good point though. And so that the darlings know out there that, all the readers, like, everything that's in your books has been tried. Like, it's been tested. It's been iterated on, very few of these recipes are perfect the first try. Like, you're pretty, you're less of a perfectionist than I am, but when it comes to stuff that goes in your books, you want it to be just right. And just right doesn't always mean perfect, but it does mean that, if you're making like a bunt and it doesn't release correctly or something, it's like, well, scrape that out and it's time to start again, and just, going and trying to improve what goes in the books. And so I think that's important to point out, because now, with the advent of AI and everything, you can grab a list of ingredients and go over to ChatGPT or Claude or anything and say, hey, here's what I have. Make a recipe for me. And that's great. But if you haven't made that recipe, you don't know what you're getting. It is really, it could be fun. It could be terrible. It could be amazing. You just never know. But just the point is that, like, you have physically baked or cooked everything that has gone into the books, or is available on your blog, or in the TorTess kitchen videos. Yeah.
It's like dining in the dark. It's dining with AI. Although our friends had a really fun party where they plugged in everything they had in their liquor cabinet, as well as, like, their cupboard.
The mixers. All the mixers and stuff.
and then invited all of us over. And then they put it into chat, and they had like a cocktail list based on whatever ingredients they had in their house. You could choose, you could pick any of those. It was super fun.
Yeah, ChatGPT came up with a list of like 14 different drink ideas using the ingredients that they had, and then step-by-step instructions on how to make all of them, because they're not big, like, mixologists, so they didn't like, they wouldn't have known how to make 99% of the drinks that it spit out, but they were able to do that, and it was pretty good. But I'm just saying, you have to be careful because it is not perfect. Totally. And yeah.
Well, and like the bunt makes me think of one of the things that's been such a delight is getting to learn actual baking tips myself that I get to weave into the books. So I never understood the process of getting a bunt out of the pan correctly until I started writing the series and speaking to actual pastry chefs. You have to spray that like, you're spraying 1980s Aquanet to get your giant hair. Like, you have to grease that bunt forever. And then the big key is, when you take a bunt out of the oven, you have to let it rest for 5 to 10 minutes before you invert it and flip it over, but not much longer, because if you let it sit in there for too long, then it starts to cling to the sides. But if you do it immediately, it's too hot and it'll just crumble and fall into pieces. Which
not too hot, not too cold. Yeah. Well, what were those guys? The bros that bunt.
Yes.
Those that you partnered with for Nothing Bunt Trouble. That was fun. I learned a lot about bunt baking from those guys. So, and with the bunt pans, they get so intricate in their designs and everything. I mean, I think if you just quickly spray it, you think, I got everything, but no, you didn't. You didn't get that little crevice down there. Or the left tower of Hogwarts Castle was still like not sprayed enough. So yeah.
Exactly. But we have some great footage over the years of TorTess kitchen videos where things like that have happened. So many baking fails where, we've filmed the whole thing. You put the bunt in the oven to bake. Now it's ready for the big reveal. You've got the cameras, the lights, like the kitchen has been taken over. It looks like a movie set. And then I go to flip the bunt, and no, it's not coming out. It's coming out.
Yeah. In fact, I think at least one whole episode of the TorTess kitchen videos that we have on YouTube is just fails, like just the kitchen fails. But yeah, so when people talk about the TorTess kitchen, and for the darlings out there who don't know what that is, it's a video series that Ellie and I had done in the past. We talked about bringing it back, but it was basically, we'd take one recipe or one theme and you would bake. Like, it was, not real time. We would do clips together. But the situation you just described is one of the reasons that we just ran out of time in being able to do these things, because, at that point, we're an hour and a half, 2 hours into making that video, and then the end product fails at the end. Now you've got to go back and make another one. So now we've got to just put everything on hold and wait another like 45 minutes while this thing's baking and hope that it comes out the second time. That happened more often. Like, I wouldn't say more often than not. It happened more than once. Let's just say that.
It happened more than once. And then you have to start from scratch with all the ingredients. Sometimes that meant running to the store. Sometimes that meant like, oh, well, now it's 6:00 at night, and that was going to be dinner for tonight. So we're getting pizza because whatever burned in the oven, or
Yeah. In fact, I think at one point we switched the set, because we used to have you at the beginning of the videos standing and there was a window behind you, but we quickly realized that we couldn't do that, because if something took not because of fails or anything, but if it just took long enough, it would go from being light outside at the beginning of the video to being dark outside at the end. And it'd be like, this took 6 hours,
Yeah. But I think the baking fails are fun and important, because that is really part of the process. And that's something that Jules and the team talk about throughout the series. And it's something that real chefs have spoken with me about, that sometimes you find your best and most famous recipe or most beloved dish by, trial and error and messing around and not having everything turn out, which I think is a good metaphor for life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think some of the most famous foods, definitely some of the most successful beers have been accidents. Like somebody put too much of something in and didn't realize it until the end, and they thought it was going to be ruined, and then they're just like, "Oh, wow, this tastes amazing!" So
this is actually genius,
right?
Yeah.
I meant to do it. It's totally planned.
And then the last thing I will say is it always warms my heart, and it's so fun when I get email from you, the darlings, when you have baked something and it has turned out. It's been something that then becomes part of your family recipes, traditions. Like that is just incredible. And it's especially true if it's a recipe that means a lot to me. If I've shared a recipe of my mom's or my dad's or my grandma or somebody like that, and then you try it and you feel the same way, like, that's chef's kiss. Nothing better at all.
I think you've gotten a lot of those comments about the Berlin bars.
Berlin bars are like,
those are
I would say all-time favorite. Those are from Sloane Krause, but fun fact, Sloane Krause, even though she does some baking with beer and some German recipes, because those were in hardcover, they didn't end up having recipes, which I don't know why from the publishing house standpoint, but that was what they decided. So we have been able to share on social and the blog some recipes like that were talked about in the book, but the actual recipe wasn't part of it.
Yeah. I don't know why they didn't do it either, but yeah, it's been fun because you've gotten a lot of email and Facebook comments and comments, Instagram, everywhere. People are like, "Where's the recipe for this?" Because they're so used to the Bakeshop series that they the second you talk about food in any of your books, their readers are like, "Where's the recipe? Where is it?"
Which I love. Like, okay, we'll bring it on. Totally. Or there's a whole subplot of mystery writer, gets murdered by fans for not producing
recipes. It's just top secret. Yeah,
that's right.
That's awesome.
Well, on that note, I have some more recipe testing to do this week. You all tasted a potential recipe last night.
That soup, that was delicious. Oh yeah. We finished all of it.
I need a giant pot and it was gone. I thought we would have leftovers for a couple days.
No, that was really good. I really liked that one. Yeah, it was really good.
It's an Italian soup with Yukon gold potatoes and sausage and kale, a little splash of wine.
Yeah, it was delicious. I'm a little nervous about the recipes coming up this week, though, knowing that it's going to be like in the high 90s. So yeah. I can't wait to try the pot roast and baked potatoes with heavy gravy that you probably have coming.
Maybe Jules will be like, we're having a winter picnic inside in front of the fire, and I'm going to grill hot dogs on the fire.
Okay. Well, yeah, I could go for that.
All right. Well, on that note, until next time, darlings, happy reading and baking.
Happy reading and baking. Until next time.